The day my husband asked me where I'd been spending all my secret money, I almost laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, because he had no idea that 2 hours earlier I had signed the final closing documents on a $34,000 cottage in the Blue Ridge foothills. And his name wasn't anywhere on those papers, not on the deed, not on the mortgage, not even in the realtor's notes. And the reason I kept it that way, he was about to show me exactly why. But let me back up, because this story doesn't start with a betrayal. It starts with a woman who spent 10 years quietly, stubbornly, invisibly, building something for herself, while everyone around her assumed she was just along for the ride. My name is Jessica Marie Calloway, though I'd been going by Jessica Harmon since I married Daniel in 2014. I was 31 years old, a mid-level project manager at a logistics firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I had $34,000 in a separate savings account that my husband didn't know existed. Not because I was hiding it maliciously, but because I had learned slowly and painfully over the course of our marriage that anything I held close to Daniel had a way of slipping through my fingers before I even understood what had happened. The cottage was mine, and for exactly 117 minutes after closing, I was the only person in the world who knew it. Then Daniel opened his mouth, and everything I had been quietly, carefully protecting came rushing to the surface, not because he found out about the cottage, but because of what he revealed instead. That's the part that made my hands shake. Let me tell you how I got there. I grew up in Asheville, youngest of 3 girls, daughter of a woman who worked double shifts at a textile plant until her knees gave out, and a father who had a gift for disappearing whenever things got hard. We weren't poor exactly, but we were the kind of family where a broken water heater meant a family meeting about which bills to skip. I watched my mother scrimp and save and sacrifice her entire adult life, and I made myself one promise when I left for college at 18. I would never be financially dependent on anyone. Not a husband, not a parent, not a boss, nobody. I kept that promise longer than most people expected. I worked through UNC Charlotte, graduated with a business degree, landed a decent job at a supply chain company, and spent my 20s being extremely boring about money. No designer bags, no luxury vacations. I drove a 2011 Honda Civic until the AC stopped working, and then I drove it without AC for another year and a half. I maxed out my 401k contributions by 26. I had an emergency fund that would make most financial advisors cry happy tears. And then I met Daniel. Daniel Harmon was the kind of man who filled up a room without trying. 6'2", dark hair, the sort of easy confidence that comes from growing up in a family where things always worked out. He was a sales director at a medical device company, made good money, drove a nice truck, and had this way of making you feel like the most important person in any conversation. I fell for him fast and hard, which looking back was the first time in my adult life I let my guard down completely. We dated for 2 years. He proposed on a hiking trail outside Breard, down on one knee in the mud ring in a little velvet box that had fogged up from the humidity. I said yes immediately. I remember thinking, this is the person I want to build something with. This is safe. We got married in September 2014 at a vineyard outside Weaverville. 60 guests, string lights, my mother dancing until midnight. It was a genuinely beautiful day. I have photos on the mantle to prove it, though I haven't looked at them closely in about 2 years. The first few years of our marriage were good, really good actually. We bought a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs of Charlotte, a nice neighborhood with an HOA that took its landscaping rules extremely seriously. Daniel's income covered the mortgage and most of the household expenses. My salary, which by then had grown considerably, went into our joint account for shared costs. And here's the part Daniel never fully understood. I also kept my own separate savings account that I'd had since I was 22. It wasn't secret. It was just mine. Something I'd always had. Something I'd told him about early in our relationship. Or at least I thought I'd told him. The first time it became an issue was about 3 years into our marriage. Daniel had gotten a little obsessed with the idea of flipping a house. His buddy Greg from the sales team had done it, made $4,000, and suddenly Daniel was watching HGTV every night and talking about building equity through strategic property investment like he'd invented the concept. "We should use your savings," he said one evening, casual as anything, not even looking up from his laptop. "The down payment on the flip property, we could double it in 8 months. Jess, Greg says the market is perfect right now." I remember putting down my coffee mug very slowly. "My savings," I said. "Yeah, your separate account. What's in there now?" "Like 2,000. It was 84,000 at that point. And the fact that he knew approximately how much was in there, that he'd been tracking it, even loosely made something cold move through me. "That's my emergency fund," I said. "I'm not putting it into a house flip." He looked up then, and there was this flash of something across his face. Not anger exactly, more like recalibration, like he was adjusting a strategy. "It's just sitting there," he said. "We could be growing it." "It's growing in a high-yield savings account," I said. "And it stays there." He didn't push it that night, but it didn't go away either. It came up again 6 months later, when he wanted to invest in Greg's side business, some kind of sports apparel dropshipping thing that smelled like a pyramid scheme from a mile away. Then again, when his brother Marcus needed a loan to cover a down payment on a car. Each time the suggestion was the same: use Jessica's savings. Each time I said no. And each time Daniel accepted it on the surface, while something shifted slightly in the atmosphere between us. I started paying closer attention to things after that. Not in a paranoid way at first, just noticing. The way Daniel would mention money in front of friends, casually implying our finances were more shared than they actually were. The way he'd sometimes reference our savings in conversations with his parents, as if my separate account was a joint resource he just happened not to have direct access to. Small things, individually meaningless. Together, they formed a pattern I didn't have a name for yet. Meanwhile, I kept saving. By 2019, I had $112,000 in my personal account. By 2021, after a promotion and 2 years of aggressive budgeting, I was at $24,000. I had moved the money into a dedicated account at a credit union across town, one Daniel had no knowledge of, no access to, and no reason to look for. I told myself it wasn't hiding, it was protecting. There's a difference, even if the line sometimes gets blurry. The idea of the cottage came to me the summer of 2022. My friend Linda, who I'd known since college, had bought a small place up in the mountains near Boone. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom with a wood-burning fireplace and a creek running through the back property. We spent a long weekend there in July, and something about it cracked me open in a way I hadn't expected. The quiet, the way the air smelled like pine and cold water even at noon. The feeling of being somewhere that belonged entirely to one person, unbothered by anyone else's expectations. "You could do this," Linda said, sitting on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the fireflies come out. "You've got the money, Jess. You've been saving forever." "Daniel would want to be involved," I said. Linda looked at me for a long moment. She'd met Daniel exactly 4 times, and she'd never said anything directly negative about him, but she had a way of listening that communicated volumes. "Does he have to be?" she said. I didn't answer. But the question stayed with me all the way home, sat in the passenger seat of my Honda like a third person on the drive back to Charlotte. I spent the next 18 months researching. I worked with a realtor named Carol who specialized in mountain properties, a sharp, non-nonsense woman in her 50s who wore hiking boots to client meetings and knew every hollow and ridge road in 3 counties. I looked at 14 properties, drove out on weekends when Daniel thought I was visiting my sister, ran the numbers so many times I could recite the mortgage calculations in my sleep. In February of 2024, I found it. It was a 3-bedroom cottage on 4 acres near the town of Spruce Pine, about 90 minutes from Charlotte. Original hardwood floors, a wraparound porch, a wood stove in the living room, and a view of the Black Mountains that made me stand in the driveway for 5 minutes without saying a single word. The asking price was $305,000. After negotiation, Carol got them down to $3,385. With my down payment, my monthly mortgage would be just under $1,100, well within what I could cover on my own salary without touching our joint finances. The closing was scheduled for a Thursday in April. I took a personal day from work, drove up alone, sat across from the title company notary with my hands folded in my lap, and signed my name on 47 pages of documents. Jessica Marie Calloway. Not Harmon, my name. The one I was born with. The one that had been on every savings account, every investment, every financial decision I had ever made entirely for myself. When the notary slid the final page across the table and said, "Congratulations, Miss Calloway. You're a homeowner." I had to press my lips together very hard to keep from crying. I drove home through the mountains with the windows down, radio off, just the wind and the road, and the feeling of something enormous and solid settling into place inside my chest. I had done it. 10 years of discipline, 10 years of quiet, 10 years of saying no to every suggestion that I should hand my security over to someone else. And I had done it. I decided not to tell Daniel yet, not because I wanted to keep it secret forever, but because I wanted one night to just sit with it, to feel what it felt like to have something completely, entirely, unconditionally mine, just for a little while. I figured I'd tell him over the weekend, maybe take him up to see it. Maybe it would be a good thing for us, a fresh start, a place we could both love. I got home at 6:47 p.m. Daniel's truck was in the driveway. I could see the kitchen light on through the window. I sat in my car for a moment, breathing slowly, holding on to the feeling just a little longer. Then I went inside. Daniel was on the couch with his phone, and when I came through the door, he looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not his usual easy smile, something tighter, more deliberate. He'd been waiting, I realized. He'd been sitting there, waiting for me to walk in. "Hey," I said, dropping my keys on the entry table. "What's for dinner?" "I was thinking we could order Thai." "Where were you today?" he said, and just like that, my stomach dropped. "Where were you today?" he said again when I didn't answer fast enough. His voice was level, but there was something underneath it, a pressure, like he'd rehearsed the question. I set my purse down on the entry table next to my keys. My closing documents were in a sealed envelope in my tote bag. I'd tucked them under my gym clothes specifically so they'd look like nothing. Now I was very glad I had. "I told you last week," I said, keeping my voice easy. "I had some errands to run." Went up toward Statesville to look at some furniture pieces for the guest room. I had actually prepared this story 3 days earlier just in case. The place Linda mentioned, that antique co-op off I-40, nothing worth buying, as it turned out. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Not with suspicion. Exactly. With calculation. "You didn't answer my texts," he said. "Cell service up that way is terrible. You know that." I moved toward the kitchen and opened the refrigerator just to have something to do with my hands. "Did you eat?" "I really am thinking Thai. The green curry sounds good." "Jessica." He said my name the way people do when they want you to stop moving and pay attention. I turned around. He was still on the couch, still holding his phone, and now he turned it around so the screen was facing me. "You want to explain this?" I crossed the kitchen to look at the screen. It was a screenshot of a text conversation between Daniel and someone named Brent. His old college buddy worked in banking up in Raleigh. The texts were from about 2 weeks ago. I read the relevant part quickly. Daniel had apparently asked Brent whether it was possible to get access to a spouse's individual account if it was held at a separate institution. Brent had written back with some information about joint property laws in North Carolina. Then Daniel had written, "She doesn't know I know about it, trying to figure out how much is actually in there before I bring it up." My whole body went cold, not because of what he knew, because of what he'd been planning. "That's your phone," I said slowly. "Why are you showing me your texts?" "Because I want you to know I've been doing my research," Daniel said. He put the phone face down on the cushion beside him. "Jess, we've been married for 10 years. There should not be a separate account with, I'm guessing, somewhere around $3,000 in it that I have no visibility into. That's not a marriage. That's a roommate situation. I noticed he said 300, not 340, not 380. He was estimating. He still didn't know the exact number, and he definitely didn't know about the cottage. I could feel the envelope in my tote bag like it was generating heat. "That account has existed since before I met you," I said. "I told you about it when we were dating." "You mentioned a savings account," he said. "You didn't say it was a secret vault." "It's not a secret vault. It's a personal savings account in my name. I've been contributing to it since I was 22 years old. My name, my social, my money. The fact that you've been trying to figure out how to access it without telling me." I stopped. I breathed. "That's what we should be talking about right now." He stood up. Daniel was good at standing up during arguments. He used his height without seeming to, just shifted the physical space of a conversation. "I'm not trying to access it without you," he said. "I was trying to understand our financial picture as a couple. You told Brent you were trying to figure out how much was in there before you brought it up with me." I said, "Those are your words. That's not trying to understand our financial picture. That's reconnaissance." Something moved across his face. For just a second, he looked caught. Then the expression smoothed back out into something more composed. "I wanted to be informed going into the conversation," he said. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you need to know the balance before you could talk to me about it? What were you planning to do with that information?" He didn't answer, and that silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard him say because I already knew. I had known for a while the way you know things you don't want to fully acknowledge. In the back of your chest, in the tension behind your eyes at 2 a.m, the house flip, Greg's drop-shipping scheme, his brother Marcus's car loan, all those years of we should use your savings, all those moments of recalibration. They had been leading somewhere, and wherever that somewhere was, Daniel had wanted to know exactly how much ammunition he was working with before he told me the destination. I sat down at the kitchen table, not dramatically, just because I needed to sit. "Daniel," I said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually think about it before you answer. If I had put all of my personal savings into our joint account over the years, all of it, everything I had, where do you think we would be right now?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, would it still be there? Would we have more or less?" He opened his mouth and then closed it. He knew the answer. The house flip would have eaten some of it. Marcus's car situation would have taken more. There had been 2 other investment opportunities I hadn't even mentioned that he'd floated, and I'd quietly deflected. We both knew the math. "I have been careful my entire life," I said. "My mother worked herself into 2 bad knees so we could have groceries. I promised myself I would never be in a position where I had nothing. That account is that promise, and I am not going to apologize for it. I'm not asking you to apologize," he said, but his jaw was tight. "Then what are you asking?" He sat back down. The easy confidence was still there, but there were cracks in it now, and through the cracks, I could see something I hadn't wanted to see for years. Daniel wasn't angry that I had savings. Daniel was angry that he couldn't reach them. "I think we need to talk to a financial advisor," he said finally.
Together as a couple, get everything on the table. I'm open to that, I said, and I meant it. But I want you to be honest with yourself about why you want everything on the table. Because if it's about building something together, I'm in. If it's about getting access to something you've been trying to calculate from a distance, that's a different conversation. He didn't answer again. 2 silences in one night. That was new.
I made myself a cup of tea. We ordered Thai food. We ate it mostly without talking, which was fine with me because my mind was running very fast in a direction I hadn't expected it to go. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, I lay in the dark with my phone and sent a text to my friend, Linda. I wrote, "I think I need a divorce attorney. Can you send me the name of the one your sister used?" Linda responded in 4 minutes flat, which told me she'd been awake, and she wasn't surprised. She sent me a name and a number, Karen Whitfield, Family Law. The little green check mark appeared next to the message, and I saved the contact under KW, dentist appointment, in case Daniel ever looked at my phone. I called Karen Whitfield the following Monday morning from my car in the parking garage at work. She had a calm, precise voice, and she asked good questions, and she didn't waste time. I told her about the separate savings account, the cottage, the texts Daniel had sent to Brent. She went very quiet for a moment when I got to the part about the texts. "He was trying to determine the balance before confronting you," she said. "Yes. And the property you purchased, it's in your birth name, not your married name. Jessica Marie Calloway." "Yes. And the funds used came entirely from your premarital savings account. Entirely. Not $1 from joint funds, Miss Calloway." She said, "You may not realize this, but you have been remarkably well positioned without knowing you were positioning yourself." There was a pause. "When would you like to come in?" I went in that Wednesday. Karen's office was in a clean, modern building in South Charlotte, and her walls had exactly 2 things on them: her law degree and a framed needlepoint that said, "Document everything." I liked her immediately. She walked me through the full picture. In North Carolina, property brought into a marriage or acquired with separate funds during a marriage can, under the right conditions, remain separate property in a divorce. The key was the paper trail. My personal savings account, which had existed since I was 22, had a clear history of deposits that predated the marriage and continued with my own income throughout. The cottage purchased with those funds in my birth name, with no joint funds involved. Karen was cautiously optimistic. "Nothing in family law is ever guaranteed," she said, "but I had done a lot of things right, even when I wasn't trying to." She also told me something I hadn't known. In North Carolina, marital misconduct can be a factor in equitable distribution, and a spouse covertly investigating how to gain access to the other spouse's individual finances, specifically with the intent to bring it up in a strategic moment. That was worth documenting. I'd already screenshot those texts the night Daniel showed them to me. I'd emailed them to myself from a personal Gmail account Daniel didn't know about. I'd also, just to be thorough, made a note in the document I'd started keeping on my phone: dates, quotes, incidents going back 3 years. Karen looked at my notes for a long time. Then she looked at me. "How long have you been keeping this log?" she asked. "About 3 years," I said. She nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "Then you're ready for this." The conversation with Daniel happened on a Saturday morning 3 weeks later. I had waited until I was completely calm, until Karen had given me a clear picture of where I stood, and until I had moved my most important financial documents to my office at work. Then I made coffee, sat down across from him at the kitchen table, and told him I wanted a divorce. He stared at me. Then he laughed, not coy, just with disbelief. "You're serious?" he said. "I am. Because of one conversation about a savings account." "Because of 10 years of conversations about my savings account," I said, "because of the text to Brent." Because of every time you've referred to my separate money as our money in front of your family. Because I have been paying attention, Daniel, and you didn't think I was. He went through several phases in the next 20 minutes. Disbelief, then frustration, then something that tried to look like remorse, but felt like strategy. He told me I was overreacting. He told me our marriage was good. He told me we could fix this. He mentioned the house, the life we'd built together. He did not, I noticed, say anything about loving me. Not once in the whole conversation. When he finally asked about the separate account, so what? You're just going to walk away with $3,000? I told him he could speak to my attorney. His face changed then. Really changed. You already have an attorney? I do. I said, when did you? He stopped. Something was clicking into place for him, and I watched it happen. The day you were supposedly looking at antique furniture, you weren't near Statesville, were you? It wasn't exactly a question, and it wasn't exactly about the attorney either. He was getting there. No, I said I wasn't. I told him about the cottage then, not because I had to, because I wanted him to understand the full picture. I told him about the 4 acres near Spruce Pine, the wraparound porch, the view of the Black Mountains. I told him I had closed on it 2 hours before he asked me where I'd been. I told him I had signed my name as Jessica Marie Calloway. He was completely silent. You bought a house, he said finally without telling me. I bought a house with money I saved for 10 years, I said. In my name completely legally, while you were texting Brent to figure out how to calculate what you thought was yours. He had nothing to say to that. For the first time in 10 years, Daniel Harmon had absolutely nothing to say. The divorce took 8 months. Karen was excellent.
The cottage stayed mine, separate property clearly documented. Karen argued it beautifully. I kept my personal savings account. We split the equity in the Charlotte house down the middle, which was fair, and I walked away with enough to replenish what I'd used for the down payment and then some. Daniel tried twice through his attorney to argue that the cottage should be considered marital property because I had concealed an asset. Karen buried that argument with a paper trail that went back 12 years. The HOA sent me a cheerful letter about landscaping compliance 2 months after the divorce was finalized. I paid the dues on the Charlotte house one last time, then signed the sale over and drove away. I moved into the cottage in December. The first night I slept there, I left every window cracked because I wanted to hear the mountains. In the morning, there was frost on the porch railing and a red-tailed hawk sitting in the oak tree at the edge of the property, watching me make coffee through the kitchen window like it was perfectly normal. Linda came up for New Year's. We sat on the wraparound porch in down jackets with champagne glasses, and at midnight, we could see fireworks going off somewhere in the valley below, tiny and colorful and far away. How does it feel? Linda asked. I thought about it for a real moment, not just a polite one. I thought about my mother's knees. I thought about the 18-year-old girl who drove away from Asheville, promising herself she would never be left with nothing. I thought about 47 pages of documents signed in a name that was mine before anyone else had a claim on it. Like, I built this floor myself, I said, and it's not going anywhere. The hawk was back in the oak tree the next morning. I decided he lived there. I named him Douglas. If you found this story powerful, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it.